This episode is brought to you in partnership by Clay Cooley Automotive, family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years. Clay, thank you for all you're doing to make intersections possible. Headquartered in Dallas, Texas, Arcus Golf is a premier owner and operator of nearly 90 private, resort, and daily fee courses in the U.S., including Cowboys Golf Club, the world's first and only NFL-themed golf club, and 8 other courses right here in the DFW Metroplex. Arcus is an innovative industry leader providing unrivaled lifestyle amenities that complement exceptional golf offerings. To learn more, visit arcusgolf.com, and thank you to the Arcus team for all that you do to make intersections happen.
Craig Hall, at 35 years old, had an empire, and that was fascinating to see how he got there. But what was more interesting for me was the fact that he might not have been at bottom, but he didn't need a magnifying glass to see it.
No, he didn't. And it's the struggles, it's the successes, to the word that you used many times in the recording, they were great to just talk about. So sincere, so honest. He tells a lot of the inner workings of these stories of how he built the empire, how he saw it fall, and then what he's created since then. Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. Tom, introduce our guest.
Craig Hall. Craig, I will tell you, is one of the more interesting, more fascinating careers that I've ever had a chance to know and to be next to and to see. Craig, enormously successful, probably most known in real estate, but he's really the epitome of an entrepreneur. A lot of different areas, a lot of different investments, a lot of different industries. And with all the success that he's had, he's also seen the bottom, though, and hit the wall with some tough failures that we'll go through, too. Author 7 different books talking about these different stages of careers and different views on it. Enormously involved in philanthropic issues and causes that range from here locally all the way to Eastern Europe. So, Craig, it's great to have him with you.
Thank you so much. Great to be with both of you.
Craig, I think what stands out first is you're an entrepreneur, and you take enormous pride in that in every conversation you and I have had. But that entrepreneurial spirit for a lot of people starts, out of school, those sorts of things. That wasn't the case for you. You started when you're almost single digits ages.
Well, I didn't grow up with a family that had money, and so if I wanted to spend money or whatever, I had to make it. And so I started out, when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, doing little businesses like a lot of people do. But I felt very lucky, and I accumulated a little bit. I saved a little bit, and it was all good.
Tell us about your family in Michigan.
So my parents were kind of an unlikely pair. My father grew up reasonably, I'd say upper middle class at a minimum, with freshman at Harvard, and gets World War II happens and never makes it to Harvard. Mm-hmm. My mother came from a small town in Ohio, Sandusky, Ohio. She heard on the radio that they were opening a new force in the Navy called Waves for women. And within an hour, she enlisted. Now, my mother was an incredible risk taker and an incredible person in that sense. Anyway, my parents met during the war, ultimately married. We lived a very, very modest. We had a 2-bedroom house. My brother and I shared a room, which was fine. It was a good upbringing, but ultimately both parents worked and, just never had a lot of extras.
And you said that they weren't particularly entrepreneurial, but you just said your mother took risks. Is that where you got the spirit for being willing to take some risks, especially early on in your years?
I think that that's a fair part of it. I think part of what encouraged me is I believe more so at the time I grew up than today, unfortunately, and I'm very concerned about that for our country. But I think that there was a general view that you could always do better than your parents. Coming at sort of the baby boomers after the World War II group, my brother and myself. The view was we would be able to exceed our parents' wealth and in a financial sense at a minimum. And beyond that, I also wasn't very good at academics, wasn't very good at other things. So I didn't have a lot of choices. So I just, I really had, a luck that I ended up as an entrepreneur. But what was really strange about it is where I grew up, entrepreneurship and business was, even though you could do better than your parents, it was a negative thing. I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which was an academic, and I wanted to be a social worker and a poet because they were both redeeming things. I really did. I spent a lot of time doing social work as a side venture as a kid, and I never, ever, if you'd asked me, the 18-year-old me, or the 17-year-old me, or the 16-year-old me, are you ever going to go into business? I would have said, no, that's not going to happen.
Well, and I think at 18, you planned on being a social worker.
I did. Yeah. I absolutely
and
did.
I think you had saved like $4,000 between like age 8 and 18 to
That's correct.
Go buy this first rooming house, which was your first.
Well, it wasn't just, I didn't save it for that purpose. That purpose came up for something that Mr. Leppert knows very well, which has got something to do with a great part of where he's given back to the city of Dallas, but also beyond as mayor. So I was in high school, a very unsuccessful kid. Academics, I got terrible grades. Football, I broke my ankle tackling the dummy the first day. You know how hard that is to do? Baseball, I played catcher without a mask, and I broke my nose. My nose isn't really this big. It's just an expansion of seventh grade baseball. So I didn't have a lot of skills. And my father worked in an advertising department, kind of not high up, but I'm making a long story out of your little question here, but he helped me. My high school was the smallest of 3 high schools, and there was a high school-wide election for mayor for a day. Now, nobody who knew me would vote for me, but the other 2 high schools, he helped me put together such a marketing campaign that I was elected mayor for a day in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And my issue was the rent strikes and the housing problem between students and landlords. And in my entire day, I ran city council meeting and everything, I couldn't solve the problem. You would think, being mayor, you can just, do anything. You know that, Tom. It's an easy job, isn't it?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, all right. So then after I couldn't solve the problem, a year later I decided I would buy a rooming house to prove you could be a good guy landlord and that everybody would pay me instead of sending the money to Canada and an escrow account, and there was a lawsuit and everything. My student tenants would like me, and I would do a good job for them. They would do a good job for me. And I had the place I bought had 4 rooms on the second floor, 3 rooms on the third floor, and a common bathroom, 1, and a common kitchen. And then it had an apartment on the first floor in the basement. And I had to clean every day that bathroom and that kitchen. And if that doesn't teach you something about life and humility, and anyway, it was a horrible experience. Yeah. Everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Did your tenants pay you?
Not so much. I loved it all. And that's why I kept buying more buildings, because I didn't know enough to stop. No, it was fun.
To go back in that childhood, though, you also suffered from epilepsy.
I did.
And you've talked about the challenge of not just the epilepsy, but the medications. And
right.
At times you felt like you were the, quote, dummy in the classroom.
I still am, actually. But yes, I took phenobarbital for a number of years, and that's a very dulling drug. I don't even know that they use that anymore for the same thing. Plus, I had all those other things that people have initials on now. Basically, and to this day, I have I get enormous amounts of things that I have to read, and it's really difficult for me. I work a lot longer hours than most anyone because it takes me a while. I catch on. People around me would tell you he doesn't lose it entirely.
You clearly are that entrepreneur. We'll get into a lot of different pieces, but I don't want to let go away a point that you made just a moment ago, because I know you feel important, feel very strongly about it. we have gone through in this country 200 and almost 250 years,
Right.
where the predominant feeling was the next generation was going to do better than the current generation. There was
Right.
that, call it the American dream, call it the future prospects, whatever you want to. But you just touched on it, applicable to this generation, that may not be the case. Do you believe that's the situation? And if so, what's the implication of that? What does that say about our country, our society?
I think it says a lot of sad, concerning, and disturbing things about our society. First and foremost, the economy is a little more complicated. I think AI and other things may improve our lifestyle even as we complain more. I mean, you can't say today that the lifestyle we have is not better than it was 40 or 50 years ago, but people are not as happy or satisfied. It's not a matter of the physical things you have, it's the mental attitude and the idea that we could do better than our parents. It wasn't just a financial thing, it was a lifestyle thing. It was that we could make something ourselves. We see it in our political elections, and I see it in so many people I talk to, just a real dissatisfaction, and it hurts. I mean, I'm in pain for them. It's a great world out there, and to be able to find your place and find a place of comfort and feel good about yourself is important. And part of that is not having a defeatist attitude to begin with. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, something like 70-80% of the people polled today don't feel like they're going to do better than
even though we had an economy that grew 4.3% in previous quarter.
It's not that we don't have more things or aren't better. It's they don't feel better themselves like they're doing.
Is part of that, Craig, that we've created expectations, and maybe those expectations come from having seen the really wealthy do well, but yet losing more of the middle class. Is it an expectation question? Or is it a real situation where that bifurcation has left a lot of people behind and they feel that they're completely out of the opportunities today?
I think it may be partly both, but I think clearly, so when I grew up, the factory worker in Michigan had a house and a cottage on a lake. Today, they don't have that. But they have a nicer house. I mean, they have more conveniences, but they don't have the same amount of economic relevance that they had because factory workers were relatively well paid. They've been helped by globalization and hurt by globalization. They were helped in the sense that they got more things cheaper from other places, and they were hurt because they're not the ones making them at a higher wage, and so they took a job at a lower wage. And that's kind of interesting backfire of globalization.
Yeah, that Michigan perspective where 40% of the people had factory jobs that had good salaries,
Sure.
They had pensions attached to them, really good set of benefits, both health and other, that were attached to those. And a lot of those jobs don't exist anymore.
Not in our country.
And especially for individuals that don't have an education.
And they're not coming back. And a lot of those jobs in the future are going to be done by robots. I mean, robotics is a big thing, and AI and robotics are going to change everything.
So let's take this mayor for the day idea, because obviously you did it before. Let's say you're president for a day. What would you say to encourage that younger generation? Where often, their feelings are real, but are they trustworthy? Hey, how do we dig themselves, kind of into that entrepreneurial mindset that you have obviously embodied?
I do think that from a leadership standpoint, I think a piece of the problem, or at least a piece that I think is frustrating to me, that I think is somewhat fixable, is that we've become way too consolidated in too many industries. We have not really, for a long time, we had fewer startups and new businesses. During the pandemic, we've had more startups, so that's improved. But it's been high-tech startups. What's happened in so many industries is consolidation, and in many ways, we don't have as easy of a time opportunity-wise as we used to have. And so I believe in a level playing field. I'm really frustrated by the idea of bashing success. And I hear politicians, because it probably works, that's why they're doing it, saying, those billionaires, well, look, there are some really selfish, bad people who have got a lot of money. And then there's some people who have a lot of money that are just great as all
doing
get
the right
out,
thing.
doing the right thing. And for us to decide that it's useful to bash success is I think not the answer. The answer is to celebrate a level playing field and to create hope and opportunity. And that to me is where we need to go as a country. We need to figure out ways to be inclusive, develop hope, opportunity, and the most level playing field we can.
So as an entrepreneur, you were 10 years old, I think, or about that, when you had I think it was a drugstore that was closing down or something.
Sure, it's a drugstore. I remember it well.
You went and bought the syrup and kind of repurposed it and made a pretty good return on it.
Well, it was 50 cents I spent. That's a lot of money in those days. Yeah, I did.
But it turned into?
I think $37. It was.
I think that was the number I had too.
It was a pretty good run. Mm-hmm. The problem was I ran out of it. I didn't realize it wasn't a formula. I wasn't smart enough to realize it was a limited commodity. But that's a lesson I maybe should have realized in some of my future activities.
Well, Kyle asked you about the rooming house you bought, which was the first one. The second one to me, in a lot of ways, is even more interesting, which was an apartment building.
Yep.
And again, we're going to get to the point very quickly in a couple of years where you got 70,000 units. You're one of the largest apartment owners in the nation.
It wasn't quite a couple of years, but it took a while. But yeah.
But back then, the second one, you identified an apartment building,
right.
But now you've used up your $4,000, so you don't have any savings.
I had debts, but I had no cash, cash, lots of liabilities. It's
as an indication of building the empire later. So what'd you do to acquire that second apartment?
Well, I went around to fellow students. I started at Eastern Michigan University because a number of reasons. Ultimately ended up at University of Michigan. And I went to kids I knew, and I said, if you give me $200 a piece, I'll make you a partner. And
did they even know what you were talking about at that point?
I wrote it on a yellow piece of paper and signed it and raised $3,500 and used that as a down payment, got seller financing, and bought a 3-apartment unit old house that was divided into 3 apartments. And that worked pretty cool. It worked great. And so then I went and did a third one, a fourth one. And when I was 19, I had about 15 or 20 buildings, a lot of fellow student money. I started getting into what I called real people housing, the non-student housing. And then eventually I got into real people money. I learned how to raise money on real apartment buildings.
Same principle as going to ask for that $200.
Yeah, yes and no. Mostly, but when I was just 24, when I was 23, I did a $10 million deal, which, in those days was a lot of money. Yeah. Actually, when I was the biggest leap, I did what I call a quantum leap. So the biggest leap was I bought a place for just under $2 million when I was 19, and it was in an area that nobody would move into because of a terrible conversation, but because of some crime problems and other things at Eastern Michigan's University. But then, all right, so fast forward, now I'm 24, and I bought, this was during a time when oil and gas prices went real high in the mid-'70s, 1974. And in between Ann Arbor and the airport was a city called Bellevue. And there was an 1,145 unit apartment complex that had less than 50% occupancy, going broke. And I drove by it and kind of had a vision. I've done this a few times in my life. And I said, I'm going to own that. And the first time I went in to meet with the then owner, who was 79 years old, and I'm 24, seems like I had a lot to talk about. And I said, I'd like to buy your property. He said, it's not for sale, kid. Get out of my office. And I said, no, you don't understand. I really am going to buy it. well, let's just talk about terms. Anyway, long story short, I ended up buying it. And one of the people who will probably hear this is a guy who lives in Dallas who's a great guy. One of the deals that I made with a 79-year-old when I bought it, a couple of things. First of all, I had no money. So I gave him a $300,000 note as the down payment. And I paid $25 million and $300,000 note, which was totally uncollectible. And he had 6 mortgages, and all of them were in default. Anyway, so part of the deal was that I had to hire his grandson and his son-in-law for at least 6 months or a year. The son-in-law, unfortunately, has passed away, but he was with me for maybe 15 years. The grandson-in-law moved with a number of us here, became president of the company for a while. He's still a good friend, and he's still in Dallas, and he was with me for a couple decades more. So I honored my word. And then I fought with all 6 lenders who thought that they should foreclose or something. But along the way, I met this short, very smart tax lawyer. And he said, son, what are you doing? I put together these things called memorandums. Anyway, long story short, he taught me how to, it was the first time in my life, how to get a fee for me. I used to do all these things and just for my share of ownership. He said, no. And then he taught me how to set up a tax shelter. So this deal turned out that for every dollar a person would put in, and they put their money in over 6 years, they would get $3.30 tax write-off. And in those days, I don't know if it was 70% at that time, but it was, rates were
north
crazy.
of 50% marginal tax rate.
Rates were crazy. So I had no problem raising. I raised $3.1 million or something, and I got a $660,000 fee, which was insane. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. And so that's what really turbocharged my, then I went on to raise a little over $1 billion after that.
Oh, but Craig, I got to push you. Mindset, 24 years old, you're dealing with $1 million transactions, you're putting some pretty creative things together, that sort of thing. Walk us through the mindset. There's not many 24-year-olds that kind of have either the entrepreneurial spirit, the perseverance, or just, let's call it arrogance to go in.
Maybe the latter.
And make these deals.
Well, mindset. Let me add, to make the picture a little more complicated. I just turned 19 when I got married. And so I didn't finish college because I was working a full-time job in order to pay for the deficits on the rooming house. First rooming house. And we had a child when we were 20. This is the only person I dated from age 16 to 19 I married. We're still good friends. We're not married, but we still have a great daughter that we share. So my life was full. I had a full life. I remember so many of the people that became involved with me in those days, and throughout my career, I've been fortunate and blessed to be with wonderful people. I've had a lot of difficult times, but I've always felt lucky to have them. I feel lucky every day I get up. When I was 24, I'll tell you another strange thing that happened. Shortly after I bought it, there was a big fire there. And I remember going just crying as I'm watching fire engines and lots of firemen, and my buildings are burning. And this is a big property with a golf course in the middle, all along a lake. Real pretty property, but in great financial trouble at the time. When you're 50% occupied, you're in deep trouble. Anyway, I like challenge. I don't know why it's fun to take lots of risks and do crazy things, but just feel lucky to be able to.
Was it the vision, the challenge, or the fear of failure that motivated you?
Definitely not fear of failure. I love the challenge, and I just, enjoyed the opportunity. And I liked learning. Meeting Arthur Clearstein was his name. Meeting Arthur and having him teach me a whole new
Every tax lawyer's got to be named Arthur, right?
Yeah. Well, and then along the same lines that during that time, and this is also kind of one of the stories of my life. I remember I was doing a lot of syndications, limited partnerships, but I didn't know what they were, and I couldn't afford real lawyers. And one day I get this call from a guy. He says, "Hello, my name's Hugh Makins. I'm the head of the Securities Bureau in Michigan." I said, "What's the Securities Bureau?" And this guy thought I was joking. He thought I was anyway. Long story short, he called me. I had to drive up to Lansing. It was a choice of either getting indicted or becoming this guy's new friend. And so ultimately, I became a member of some Securities Commission and good buddies, and I learned how to do things. I was a model citizen.
You can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, well, no, I believe in doing things right. It's just sometimes I don't know what don't know what.
Well, today
right
they
is.
would throw you in jail for that. Probably,
They would.
I don't think there'd be a learning lesson like it probably was then.
Well, Kyle, to that point, we'll probably get into this, but in the 1980s, a whole lot of people in Dallas, Texas, went to jail, and some of them kind of innocently, like we're talking about. Many of them not so much, but they all got caught in those days, and it's not something that we'll see again in our lifetime. It was a strange time.
So you're doing you're in your 20s. You're doing real estate deals, successful, but you're also now doing a lot of other investments too. You've got a fitness. You've got an HMO.
Yeah.
Talk about the HMO. That's a fascinating kind of investment, and I want you to tell how it turned out too.
Yeah. So a doctor friend of mine introduced me to some people who were senior middle management of some nonprofit HMOs, health maintenance organizations. And in those days, there were a lot of nonprofit health maintenance organizations, but there was a new law that came in that allowed for-profit health maintenance organizations. So it was a new idea. And some of these people were interested in leaving where they were and forming a for-profit health maintenance organization. And the doctor had some doctor groups that wanted to be the providers of the medical care. All they lacked was cohesiveness, courage, money, and a place to sit and work. So I invested a picnic table, 7 chairs, and $111,000. And then that was in 1978. And shortly after I moved to Dallas, there used to be a firm in Dallas called Epler, Turner. It was a stock brokerage company. And they helped me take the company public. And then years later, so I think the whole thing was 5-6 years. Anyway, I sold my $111,000 for $66 million. Seemed like a good idea at the time.
You don't need a calculator to understand.
I thought it was
That's
good.
a good return.
How good, I don't know, but it was good.
Mm-hmm. So now you're into your mid-30s. You've done one of the largest private placement firms in the nation at this point, 35 years old, mid-30s. You've got 70,000 apartment units, multifamily units, plus or minus, $4 billion worth of assets. 35 years old, that's pretty heady stuff.
Not so fast there. Yeah. So the funny thing is, in 1985, we raised $325 million. We were the largest private placement sponsor in the U.S. at the time, and there was a big awards ceremony, and I didn't go.
And most of that was on multifamily, Craig?
Yeah, it was mostly multifamily. We and one other company were the 2 largest owners at that time in the world of multifamily. I knew things were starting to go wrong in real estate. I didn't know how wrong, but in the last half of 1985, I hired a company and an individual who ran that company who, for real estate people, is sort of a famous name. I hired him because in the mid-'70s, he famously helped reorganize the Trammell Crow Company. and the Trammell Crow Company was in similar shape to what I was maybe. But anyway, Ken Leventhal. Ken, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but great guy. And so by early 1986, I was really concerned about a lot of things in the economy and believed that a lot of real estate was overbuilt, too much supply, too fast.
How much of this came from the Tax Reform Act of '86?
Well, I think the Tax Reform Act was the opposite. It stopped the benefits of tax, which kind of aggravated the problem that was already going to happen. The problem would have happened with or without that, but then it became much worse. And from an investment standpoint, it was a disaster. And the approach the federal government took, I can never prove what I'm about to say, and there aren't that many people of my age bracket, but there are some who I know would agree. I think, in part, if I wasn't here, but in the 1970s, a lot of Texans had bumper stickers that said "Freeze a Yankee." And I think the Washington establishment was a little bit anti the Texas success in the early 80s and the sort of swagger of Texas. And so in many ways, the epicenter of the way that the problems were dealt with was Texas. And when I say problems, it's today regarded as the savings and loan crisis. But if you look at Texas commercial banks, if you look at Dallas, all the big banks failed. So it's not just the borrowers were in trouble, the banks were in trouble. Now today, when we have the 2008-9 crisis, which arguably in a systemic manner could have been worse, the federal government handled that and any other since the 1980s with things they call extend and pretend. They didn't just crush everyone. In the 80s, it was a crush everyone. Totally different time. Interesting to live through.
Mm-hmm. And you had purchased some savings and loans that you owned at that time.
Yeah. The worst thing to do is to be an owner of real estate, a borrower, and to be an owner of savings and loans, which I was. So I owned two savings and loans.
Were those connected? In other words, there were some of the real estate loans that were into the savings?
No. Well, yes and no. That's kind of funny the way you said that. And this is something that rarely I've ever heard this talked about. But so one savings loan was I started with cash, and I owned 100% of it. That was my second one. The first one, very interesting, we deregulated deposits sometime in the early 1980s, meaning that savings loans could pay whatever they wanted on a deposit. And a lot of savings and loans had lots of home loans at a certain fixed rate. So many savings and loans suffered from a mixed match where they might be paying more for their deposits than they're earning on their loans. And literally, this is a bizarre story, but it's true. Literally, a regulator comes knocking on my door. I'm 32 years old, 33, I think maybe.
What year was this?
1982, 81. Come in, hi, you're a successful real estate guy. We have a new program at the Federal Home Loan Bank. We are allowing real estate guys to put in assets instead of cash as regulatory capital. So you can buy an S&L that's got a few little problems and be the owner, and you don't have to put money in cash. Well,
you just put your assets in.
Yeah.
You just put some.
So I put land in, which they appraised, and that's what encouraged me and a lot of other real estate guys who ended up, a number of them ended up in jail. A lot of people who owned S&Ls ended up in jail. A lot of people in Dallas, but all over. And part of it, again, was the between Congress and the regulators, they wanted to have blame to go somewhere besides policies.
You just said the regulators actually were the ones that came to you. In fact,
there were different regulators a few years later, but yes.
No, but I understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they were the ones that were the impetus to at least get into the second savings law.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. But for their encouragement, I never would have done it. One of the lessons, I'm not a real fan of businesses that depend on or benefit from government-related things. I'd much rather do something that's less – everything's got regulation, but I go for more independence, and I'm not looking for favors from any regulator. I don't want to get beat up. I want to just be honorable, do my thing, and move on.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop you real quick.
Sure.
Tell us why you came to Dallas. Obviously, you were headquartered in Michigan, and so – obviously, I think, Detroit, you've mentioned in other things I've read about you, how it's an automobile city and, you were not in that industry and thus kind of not part of the business brass in a certain sense. Dallas real estate is very central to the business brass. So tell us how you got here and why.
Well, the first part of the puzzle is deciding to leave Detroit. And I was in the Young Presidents Organization in Detroit, and they have in YPO kind of smaller groups, which are like your board of directors kind of a forum. And I was in a forum, and after you present your issues, and after they heard me a little bit, they said, you really need to get out of Detroit. You really don't belong with us. And so, okay, that's
kicked down a forum into Dallas.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the first half of the equation. I had offices in several cities because we had apartments. We were maybe the largest in Texas. We were certainly the largest in Arizona. We were big in California. We were big in a lot of states. We had a lot of apartments. But for me, it got down to a choice between Atlanta and Dallas. And I think one of the luckiest and best things that's ever happened to me is moving to the city of Dallas. I felt welcomed. To this day, I just pinch myself at the friends I have and at the just business attitude and quality of life we have here.
But why back then Dallas versus Atlanta? How did you do the analysis and kind of in your mind say, okay, Dallas is where I'm going to put my business? And you moved a lot of people here over the years too.
We moved 90 families over the first 2 years to the headquarters here, and we had 600 people off North Central on headquarters. Dallas just felt comfortable, and Atlanta was a good option, but ultimately, fortunately, I thought Dallas was the best option, and I believe Dallas is certainly, that was a long time ago. Dallas has grown and changed, and it's not quite as small of a town as it was then, but it's still a very welcoming place. And I'd like to think that anyone coming here from California or New York or anywhere else, that I'd sure love to help and encourage them and do anything to show the welcomeness of Texas. I'm sorry I wasn't born here, but I'm a Texan by choice and
got here quick.
darn happy.
Yep. So as I said, at this point, enormous success. Not only in the real estate, but
success
in other
is a relative thing, Tom. But
you've done well. Clearly, a lot of people thought regulators, et cetera, come in. But now we deal with 86, late 80s, real estate crash, Dallas and other places, but arguably pretty tough in Dallas. And in 1992, the federal government, you're the second one, that sues you and uses kind of an interesting cut on the law to say we're going to seize all of your assets in effect overnight. Talk about that story and your thought process when that started happening.
Well, first of all, I'll never probably know the motivations or what happened, but the intent of the regulators and of the legislation was to, I believe their primary goal was to get cash. And I think their secondary goal, for reasons that had happened prior to 1992, was to maybe get me because I'll go backward for a minute. Now, this is, I know you all have a lot of people listen to stuff.
It's just the three of us.
Okay, good. All right. So just three of us. No, it's kind of a funny story. So this would be a little bit why there might have been a little bit of personal on this. I think it was 1986, he may hear this thing. I don't normally tell these stories, but I'm to this day, he's one of my closest friends. He's not practicing medicine anymore, but I'm in seeing my doctor, and he said, "You look terrible," and other explicit, more explicit words. And long story short, I tell him, what's going on, and the SNLs are a mess, and everybody's yelling at everybody, and everybody's suing everybody, nobody sitting down talking. And he said, "Well, you ought to go talk to the speaker." I said, "What do you mean speaker? Speaker who?" He said, "Well, the Speaker of the House of the U.S. Representatives." I said, "Well, I don't, I give like 50 cents and I don't give any money to politics." And said, "Oh," he said, "He's a Texan. You're a Texan. He'll talk to you." And I said, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "Well, I'll call Uncle Frank and see if he can help." So I'm sitting there. His uncle is a Jim Wright's doctor in Fort Worth. So I get an appointment to go speak to the speaker in Washington, D.C. for 15 minutes in 1986. And I didn't want to spend the airplane money to go. And things were kind of rough. Anyway, so I go. My lawyers are totally shaken up. They couldn't believe that I got this appointment. And I met with Speaker Wright, and then he started calling in other people.
So what did you tell him, though? 15-minute meeting. What was your agenda? What did you tell him?
What I told him was that it felt like people were picking on Texas, and that everybody I knew was that nobody's talking to anybody, and that I'm not getting return calls from a particular regulator that I had called over 100 times, and that the way that everything's going about it, that it's going to cause a real collapse. And I thought from my research and what Ken Leventhal had done, that there's a big economic problem, but we need to address it in a different way. And according to the Wall Street Journal, he picked up a bill that was going to be voted on for quote-unquote emergency relief for the savings loans of $6 billion. And then there was some other articles that said some of it had something to do with a guy named Craig Hall getting a return phone call. And anyway, the bill was held up for a while. And like I said, I never gave him any money. It was not a quid pro quo thing. I think it was partly a Texas thing. I think he knew a lot of other real estate people who probably had been his supporters and otherwise. But he tried to insert himself as best he could from his position to try to get the regulatory community to take a broader view of what was going on. It helped for a short time. But the problems went on for years. And the way it was handled, I think, cost every taxpayer a lot of unnecessary money and caused a lot of failure of financial institutions. Not saying there wouldn't have been failures or problems, but it was handled very aggressively in a manner that didn't have to result in the way it did. So now fast forward to 19...
aggressive was the federal government dumped a lot of the real estate assets at pennies on the dollar.
Made some people really rich. I was a contributor,
Yes.
not a recipient.
Yeah,
I would have liked to have been a recipient. No, I know people that got so rich, off of things that I used to own. I mean, it's like,
But
really?
as opposed to 2008, 2009, where the
100%
federal government flooded with liquidity.
That's right.
As opposed to this.
Exactly.
Okay.
It upended a lot of lives. It was a sad, tough thing. And, going go backward for a second. So I told you about Ken Leventhal. So one day, I think this was early '86, I'm driving Ken to the airport. Now, he was maybe 65 or something, but I never called him anything but Mr. Leventhal. Behind his back, I call him Ken. But anyway, I said, Mr. Leventhal, what do you think? He said, well, son, if I were you, I'd declare Chapter 7. You're a young man. You could start all over. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I don't believe in bankruptcy. He said, well, then, if that's your attitude, then I'm going to be there to help you. And he was totally there.
Okay, Craig, so how bad was it? I mentioned valued before we got into the declining values of land, properties, et cetera, $4 billion, 70,000 units. We did that. You also had about $3 billion worth of debt. Nearly all of it, interestingly, though, unlike a lot of real estate players, it was non-recourse. You only had a little bit south of $200 million that was kind of personal guarantee.
Right.
How bad was it for you?
Well, it was, I had at one point 500 lawsuits. It was fighting every day. And, there were...
And most of those were creditors coming back on you because
not
their collateral had gone down?
Yeah, coming back on partnerships, and I was trying to save them for investors. I had no equity, but I was working for all my investors. That was my motivation. Anything I owned, I liquidated to try to help the investors. So things I owned personally, I put back into the pot. I wasn't looking to save myself or to make any money on it that way. The fight went on from 1986 to 1992, and things were getting better. Along the way, I bought land in Frisco and did other things in the late 80s. So it was mostly playing defense, but an occasional offense of play came out of the game. In 1992, when I was sued, I was shocked because I thought things were almost at the finish line in a good way. And I had no creditor problems. No creditor was coming after me. And
it was non-recourse.
Yeah. And on the personal side. And so when I was, the government went into Judge Jerry Buckmeyer's court at 4:45 in the afternoon, April 2nd, 1992, and said, here's a lawsuit against Craig Hall, and here's a seizing of his assets, and we want you to sign these, Judge. And fortunately, he said he asked if they had informed me or our attorneys, and they said no, we don't have to. He said, from what I understand, I mean, I don't know. I've ever seen a transcript, but he said something like, I know Mr. Hall, you know how to reach him. Do you know his attorneys? Yes, we do know who they are. Reach them tonight, and we'll have a hearing tomorrow, and you all come back in here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and we'll see where we are.
So the judge didn't sign the papers?
He refused to sign the papers.
And therein starts the long night. Tell us about it.
Well, he saved my bacon. I mean, incredibly. I had over 1,000 partnerships and about, 15 or 20 corporations. Anyway, I had a long night with Alan Feld, who's head of Aiken Gump at the time, Frank Wright, who's still a very, very close friend, an attorney. My wife was there. We weren't married then. She's an attorney. Ultimately, today, I think you can file Chapter 11 online, and you do it 24/7. But in those days, you had to do things, I think, at somebody's office in the morning. So I signed at 1:30 or so in the morning a blank piece of paper to file Chapter 11. And then the next day, I held a press conference, and I said, I'm never settling this lawsuit for anything more than zero. And, you're in for a fight for your life. And ultimately, a year or so after a lot of negotiations, a lot of things, I settled the lawsuit for zero. I paid the government zero. I admitted to the fact that I did zero, nothing wrong. I didn't owe anything, and I wasn't going to pay anything. In order to nobody else was a problem in the bankruptcy. Everybody could care less except the government. In order to make a deal and let me out, which was kind of a good deal, but a little strange. They we negotiated to buy $200 and some million worth of mortgages that some of our partnerships owed that now were taken over by banks that the government took over. And they sold them to me for about 50 cents on the dollar, which is kind of crazy. It was $102,500,000 I had to come up with within 90 days, and then they would agree that I could get out of bankruptcy as far as they were concerned. And if I didn't, then I agreed that I would give them a non-dischargeable judgment for $22 million for playing the game. So for being willing to try and get out and do my lawsuit for zero, which was a big important thing to me, I would agree to pay $22 million if I couldn't give them $102,500,000 out of the next rest of my life from earning, and I would come out of bankruptcy with nothing. So I'd come out either way, but I would have nothing except a non-dischargeable $22 million judgment, and they would collect from me for the rest of my life or whatever. I don't know.
But your net worth at this time had plunged.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But, one of my close friends, a guy named Dick Hyman from New York, he sort of helped me arrange. It's so funny because the New York Wall Street firms that helped me are all out of business. Kidder, Peabody, Payne Weber, they don't exist anymore. And they they were very tough on me, and ultimately they wouldn't let me be the general partner to buy the loans. They wouldn't, it wasn't an easy or good deal. But you do what you have to do. Yeah. Anyway, I'm still here.
We've left a piece out though.
Yeah,
there was a lot of money that you put back into these partnerships and investors that you didn't have a legal obligation to do.
Right.
But you liquidated $175 million worth of your
assets,
personal assets.
Mm-hmm. I did.
To make those partners, investors whole.
It was the right thing to do. And money comes and money goes. You just want to be honorable and do the best you can to exceed people's expectations. And if life is all about selfish motivations, then pretty sad life.
Not many real estate investors back then did that, though, Craig.
I know.
And you wrote a book, The Responsible Entrepreneur. And in that, you talked a lot about the ethics of business people, views, et cetera, those sorts of things. Talk a little bit about how you saw your, not legal, but your moral obligation at that point, your thought process of liquidating most of your personal assets to make them whole. And then did you ever kind of say, hey, hold it, I don't need to do this?
No, I never had a second guess at that. And, I think most people, most of the time, know the difference between right and wrong. And yet a lot of people fly too close to the sun. And if I had at all flown too close to the sun, I would have been one of those put in jail. Because think about the ingredients. I owned real estate, and I owned 2 savings and loans. And I had been political and got, regulators' feathers ruffled. So I was a target. And believe me, they looked at everything and, under every hood. And had I ever, people would come to me, and I won't name names because some of them are now out of prison now, and they're back in Dallas. But people would come to me and say, if you'll make a loan for me of this much, I'll loan you this much. And I never did any of that.
Which was a lot the Keating thing of using the savings and loan as a way to raise money for personal real estate developments.
And what's wrong with that is you have the U.S. government guaranteeing the depositors money. And so that's where they come in. And so you have certain rules. And there's sort of a smell factor. You can know right and wrong, but it's it's arguably gray in some areas. But if you get into the gray, you could get in trouble. So I look back and I think to myself, I'm on the one hand, I'm very lucky that I had that attitude. On the other hand, thank God. People's lives were very upended, and some people were not as evil as
it destroyed a lot of people.
Yeah.
Why did you write the book Responsible Entrepreneur?
Because I believed I had perspective. It wasn't meant to be about me or any self-aggrandizement. I believe that entrepreneurship should be responsible. I believe that you can do. I have so many people I respect have done really well because they're respected for who they are and the way they conduct themselves. So you're willing to go the extra mile, like you had Ken Hirsch on. People like Richard Rainwater, Ken Hirsch, and so many others. Because of their approach, they've actually made more money. You don't need to be a bad guy to succeed. You can do much, much better by just being straightforward, honest, and having
you did the right thing. You made investors whole, made partners whole. You went out and said, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not going to settle this, all that. That point forward, did that pay you benefits in the business world?
I don't know, and it doesn't really matter to me. Coming out of my Chapter 11, I changed my business philosophy, and in that respect, it would not have helped me. And I changed it in ways that just in the last 6 months or a year, I've thought maybe it was a mistake.
What was that?
Elaborate, yeah.
Keep going.
There's a story there. We got to get the rest of this one.
Yeah, well, I decided I would just do things smaller and on my own, and I didn't care about being big. And for some reason, I just didn't like apartments. So I decided I would sell every apartment I owned. It took me like 20 years. I sold them all. And then a year or two later, I built the first one, which was just recently. And somebody was asking me a question about 6, 8, 9 months ago, and it just hit me. I could have rebuilt, and I could have been much larger. And I do think size matters in real estate. We have a few $1 billion and we have a lending business. We're not doing terrible. I mean, financially, we're doing fine. But I could have gone a different route. I just didn't feel like I was mad at apartments, and I didn't feel like investors deserved me again. They didn't deserve the wrath of dealing with me again. So now years later, both those things have changed in the sense that in our wine business, we started an investor program in 2009, and we've done differently than what I used to do, but some things.
So I want to touch on one thing. You just mentioned the wine business. Your wife, Catherine, is obviously a huge part of that. Where did she come into play? I think y'all met through Ann Richards and some people around her at the time. So just talk about how she kind of entered the scene, because obviously she's notable in her own right.
She is. Kathy was the U.S. ambassador to Austria under Bill Clinton.
And was asked to stay on by George W.
And sorry, thank you so much for saying that. And we're very grateful for that. And wow, she was Stu Eisenstadt, who was with the State Department, helped negotiate, and it was lead negotiator. But Kathy was a signatory and final piece on the last bill settling World War II claims. So pretty crazy stuff. The wine business is all Kathy's love, and my idea was you make rosé wine by taking white wine and red wine, you put them together and shake it up a little bit. I've learned a little since then, but no, that was she grew up in California, and her father and mother had a small vineyard, and that kind of got us into it.
But sometimes you've said previously that sometimes in business it's not good to know much about it as you enter into it. Were you talking about wines?
No, I think that's probably true of a lot of things. I think maybe I'm going to be unfair here, and I don't mean to demean higher education, because I believe in it. But I do think you can learn too much and know why not to try something. if you think too hard, it's it's like I have a wonderful young lady who has a master's in real estate from Harvard and a master's in architecture from Harvard, and I'm always joking with her about she's wants to run numbers, and I say, Dixie, we don't have outside investors. It's our money. I just put my finger up in the air and I decide I want to do that. So don't worry about it. We're just going to build the building. Yeah, but what do we?
Figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Exactly. You can know too much, and then you decide yourself why not to do something.
So how'd you get in the Cowboys? One of those investments that you had to liquidate at this tough time was a 10% stake in the Dallas Cowboys, which, as you've said, was something that was a pretty good long-term hold.
Well, a couple things. First of all, on how I got into it, I had talked to Clint Murkison about buying the team, went to some games with him, decided I didn't want to own over 50%, which is what they thought you had to do at that time. Then Bum Bright came into the picture. Nobody had any idea the team was for sale. And then Clint suggested Bum and I talk, and we did. And one thing led to another. And my motivation, Bum's motivation, was to keep the team in Dallas. The worry was that somebody would buy it and move it. And none of us were really sports enthusiasts, which is unfortunate. It shouldn't have been that way. I always went to every Detroit away game, and there was a pecking order. We chartered American airline flights, and the owners who would go would sit in the first seats in first class, and then Tex Schramm, who actually ended up being a 5% owner, and then the coaches, and then the players. Anyway, our group was so bad, almost nobody would go to away games. And nobody, and there were two 50-yard line boxes. Bum had one and I had one. And I would go sit in the corner. I'd invite 25 people or something to the game. These were not normal boxes, much bigger. And Bum and I would share a lunch or a breakfast, depending upon the time of day, in the Tejas room, which was kind of behind where our boxes were. And so we'd use it as an entertainment thing. But I would sit in the back working and hardly watching the game. Anyway, so fast forward to Jerry Jones. He really reinvented the sport. He got television to pay. He deserves the credit for not just, I think, the NFL, but even beyond the NFL, a lot of sports value. He's done an incredible job of creating value. And I look at the team values today and think, well, there's another thing, you idiot, you dummy. You could have been, should have, would have, but oh well.
Well, one that turned out a little bit different, you mentioned it earlier, was there was a little place called Frisco back in the 80s that had, I think, 6,000 people, but probably a whole lot more rattlesnakes than that. Viewed as being, some people would confuse it if it was in Oklahoma or if it was in Texas. Yeah. But you went and bought a good chunk of land back in the mid-'80s. Talk about Hall Park and how that's played out and what the original genesis for the investment and then how you've seen it and how it's evolved.
Well, we bought, I think, 5 or 6 different sites and sold all of them at this last one you're talking about. And we did as land investments. I decided it'd be fun to build. My theory then was, this was so late 80s, I'm buying it. First building we built, we started in 1997.
So a little patience, decades.
Similar to the Arts District. I would do things and then be very patient. And my thought then until 2017, 18 was to build the best office park ever, anywhere. And we built lakes and we built roads and, we used to, when we had a 4-story building, the fire department would come practice and they had fun. When we built a 6-story, they have to get a new fire truck. It was great fun. I mean, so we were good because we kept building taller buildings. Around 2017, 18, I decided, office parks were going to likely go by way of malls. I didn't realize how fast or how much it would be, but the pandemic really changed it. Yeah. And so we decided to go mixed use. And so that led to many years of planning and ultimately tore down a 12-year-old building and a 14-year-old building to start the new stuff. So,
well, let's transition down to downtown too. Talk about Hall Arts and kind of your thesis down there and kind of actually want to get into where you see downtown today and kind of where it's going.
Sure. So in 1995, I was approached by a small partner of a group that owned an underground parking garage in the Arts District and various land sites. And the main owners, I think they had $110 million invested, and they wanted tax loss. They knew that the values had gone down. So long story short, I paid them $10,500,000 on December 31, 1995. And it was a long time before I built anything. And since then, we've built a 500,000 square foot office building, had no intention of selling it. Got an unsolicited offer and said, okay, it's gone. And I'm not a good seller, but anyway, I'm glad that it worked out that way. And then,
and when did that transaction happen?
Now you're testing my memory. 2016, 17. And then we started the condominium building, the hotel. And I keep telling my marketing people to tell the truth and put this out there. And they, and now you're going to help me out here because I'll put it out there. And so I made a very bad mistake on the condominium building. I finished the bottom 60%, and the top 40%, I thought people would buy shell space. There was a building next to the mansion that was all sold out all as shell. And, a lot of high-end people want things differently. They'll come buy a unit and they'll tear out a wall and move things. So I thought, don't have to do that. I'll just sell those as shell. Turns out nobody wanted shell. And by the time this building was, opening into the pandemic, and because of the pandemic, I think people literally, not only do they not want shell, but how much for all the model furniture? I'll take it exactly as is. Leave the Kleenex there. And literally, so after not selling any of the top part, we literally are just now finishing it off the final part. So we've done it in stages up to the top, and the top penthouse is still under construction. Sometime next spring, it'll be done. We have 3 floors.
Still unsold?
Yeah. No, we have a whole bunch of it's unsold. Probably not. See, I make a lot of mistakes. It's not. Yeah. Well, you've only. Well, I shouldn't say you've only gotten my successes. You got to some mistakes. Yeah. Anyway, it's consistent. If I'd gone to school, I could have been something. But anyway, so that's what we're finishing it off, and it's good. And then the hotel, we're also making some kind of major changes, and I would get in deep trouble if I went too far with this, but there'll be some changes at the hotel in terms of brand and other things coming up.
That'll be interesting to see. So how do you look at downtown? Downtown, Arts District, Uptown, been very involved in Clyde Warren Park, efforts there. We know there's a lot of things going to happen in that Arts District. Kind of talk about how optimistic you are of kind of the whole, what we'll call the core, and throw all those 3 pieces into it.
Well, first of all, I'm happy. I'll give you my answers, but I'm anxious to hear when you have Lucy on, because I saw that she's coming. She's a great friend. She and Henry, her spouse, are just wonderful people, and she'll have really good answers to that. I divide, and I think you more or less did as well, south of Ross as kind of one area, Ross Arts District, Area 2, and Uptown. For a lot of reasons, Uptown, let's just spend very little time on. Very successful. Very, very successful. Yeah. Ross Avenue, let's say, jury's out. Arts District, some good, some it's not perfect. Frankly, since the pandemic, it's been tougher. Mm-hmm. South of Ross, 1994. I'm just coming out of my financial troubles. I bought St. Paul Place, 200-some thousand feet. 1995, I bought Harwood Center, $10 million for the first place, $50 million for the second. I'm enthusiastic about downtown is going to get better, but I didn't buy those at expensive prices. I bought them as discounted deals because downtown was tough then. Mm-hmm. By 1998, I decided unless the city made some fundamental changes and unless certain things were done, I thought South of Ross was going to continue to decline. I sold to Steve Witkoff, our current ambassador settling the world's conflicts.
Spending a lot of time at the Kremlin.
Yeah. $110 million. Thank you, Steve. I heard that he lost them a few years later. Harwood Center has recently been foreclosed on, and I don't know if the auction's taking place. I jokingly said to some of the people in my office, I didn't say it jokingly, they thought I was serious, that we're going to go bid on it. And they thought I was completely lost it. Had a minimum bid of $10 million. I mean, 770,000 square foot building. It's just a shame what's happened. A lot of the buildings were underparked, too close to each other. There just wasn't a lot of things done thoughtfully. I'm more hopeful today than I have been forever. And the reason is everybody's talking about it like it's a new problem and like it's panicked. There is $10 billion of construction going on in the
investment.
area.
Yep.
And just a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and everybody's talking about it. And I think part of the real answer, and Ray Washburn, your show with him was terrific, and he's an incredibly great guy, a lot of vision. But I think he and others, and I certainly think the more residential conversions we have, the better. And the more you can have people living there, the more they're going to demand that there's security and safety, and retail will come and so on. It's not going to be redone as office per se. People today are willing to pay a lot more. Companies are willing to pay a lot more for offices that are have high amenities and are places that are going to likely retain and recruit employees. That's more important than a cheap deal.
So the A+ is doing well, and B and below is out in the cold.
And in many cases will not come back. I mean, some of the B maybe if it's close enough that it's really a B+, but some of it has got to be converted to some other use, or and unfortunately they're not big pieces of land, so they're hard.
Is it multifamily? Is it hospitality?
I think it's both multifamily and hospitality are the two logical ones. And as a lender, which is a big part of my business today, we've looked at making loans for both multifamily and hospitality conversions.
Talk about that lending business, because that's a big business for you.
It is. We started a very modest basis in 1995 doing second mortgages. Today, we'll do about $650 million this year in only first liens. We're a construction lender all over the United States.
Property type?
Heavily in hospitality and apartments, but we do some industrial. And now, not across the country, but in Texas and in particular in Dallas, I'm all excited to do office. We've done one office so far in the last few months, and I'd love to do more.
New or renovation?
Both, but primarily renovation. The problem with new, and we're about to build an office building, the numbers are so tough. And it's worse in Dallas than other places, but it's true everywhere. But the reason it's worse in Dallas is we have normally when construction comes way down, which it is right now for commercial real estate in general, because we were overbuilt and interest rates were low for a long time. So normally when that happens, prices moderate. They may not moderate it enough to make it easy, but they moderate. And that's true today for apartments. They're moderating. For industrial, they're moderating.
Mm-hmm.
For office, our mechanical engineering and plumbing is the same contractor that does data centers. And they're so busy, and they can charge whatever they want to charge. And certain other trades are very busy. When you have Texas Instruments spending $40 billion in Sherman, it's just I can't wrap my head around $40 billion. And that's a lot of construction. And so all of a sudden, it's the oxygen's being sucked out of the construction market in Dallas, Texas.
Yep. Let's go back to the winery for just a second. You wrote a book called The Perfect Score, and you talked about going into the wine business, not having a lot of experience. You said Kathy had some, but going into it. But out of that, you've come up with two brands, Hall & Walt, who are viewed as premium brands, have been rated as 100s, which is a perfect score in that world. Talk a little bit about that business of kind of how you've thought about it, made investments in that. But also, Craig, our conversations, you've pointed out that this is a pretty tough business right now, and it didn't look like you had much glimmer in your eyes of what the future would be either.
Well, it is a tough business right now, and it's really interesting. I was over the weekend looking at some notes I had from during the pandemic, and the wine business was booming because everybody was staying home drinking. And post-pandemic, it's like somebody turned a switch, and the demand has decreased both from the young drinkers and some people who are taking Ozempic or things and just not eating or drinking as much. I think the solution to that is that the weaker players are going to go out of business, and all players, including us, are going to shrink some, and so supply will shrink to demand. It's been about 2 years so far, and I think we have another 2 years to go. It's painful, but I've been to the movie before, and it does get better. It's not the 1980s in real estate. It's just life.
Investment opportunity?
It is for. I've been trying to figure out for us. The problem is, I don't. We just recently have started, which we were working on for a long time, a champagne we've added to our portfolio out of France, just in time for the tariff. We just literally were bringing over our first champagnes and paid some tariffs. I think if I were younger and more motivated to go in that area, there are some opportunities. But with wine, I think you have to really go for quality, and quality doesn't get discounted as much as some of the lower quality places. So, I think there are people that are looking for and waiting for the opportunities, and there will be some.
For the audience's sake, how long have you been in the wine business? I think it's close to 3 decades.
It is. It's exactly right. It's 30 years.
Yeah. So about 3 decades in, how long did it take to actually have quality, to your words?
I can't remember exactly when we got the first 100-point score, but we got the first 90-point score maybe 15 or 20 years into it. And I remember walking in San Francisco doing Christmas shopping and getting this phone call that we had just gotten a 90-point score. And Kathy and I were together, and we both thought we had died and gone to heaven. It was like the most exciting thing in the world. And now we've got, I don't know, several hundred of those. So it's not a easy business or a business for the faint of heart. It's really interesting, and I think this is what will persevere in more challenging times, to see what a brand is worth. When I first was in the apartment business, I didn't talk about this earlier, but I wanted to create a brand of apartments, and I called everything something or other tree. And my brand was trees. And so, candle tree, apple tree, on and on. but I didn't have any idea. It was nothing like what the wine business has been. Creating a brand is. I'll give you a quick funny story. So, literally, I can't believe I did this, but I'm in Honolulu on my birthday this past year, looking at a loan deal, and it's an office building they're going to convert to dual flag hotel. And so we're walking around with about 15 people, and one guy is the head of the contractor. And he's hardly said anything in 2 hours, and he's kind of a grumpy-looking guy and a Hawaiian, a local. And then at one point he looks over and he says, "You're not Hall with Hall Wines, are you?" I said, "Well, yeah, that is us. That's ours too." "Oh my God, I'm such a fanboy. I love Hall Wines." And he starts going on and on for like 10 minutes. He won't shut up. "I have so much of your wine at my house. Sometime we drink together." Just, it made me feel so good. It was such a heartening, funny story. And I mean, a lot of people know the brand and they have stories around it. And so one of the cool things is you can remember when you enjoyed a great glass of X, or Walt Baca, or our champagne's called Michel Foch. And it's a long story, but we can't sell it yet in Texas, but we're working on it. There's so many laws. The alcohol business makes every other business seem like a tame, unregulated thing. Alcohol is tough.
Terrific. We talked a little bit about earlier on your commitment to entrepreneurship and how much of your identity is built in that. You wrote a book called Boom, and you talked about entrepreneurship. And at that time, it had been sagging. As you pointed out a little bit earlier, it's kind of bumped up now. But once you take the technology out piece, do you think today that there's as much opportunity for entrepreneurs as there was when you, in effect, bought that soda syrup back when?
Generally, no. I think it's. I think there are public policy things that should be done to level the playing field,
such as
making capital more accessible, making Main Street entrepreneurship more respected. It's a big part of our economy, but it's shrinking. It's there. The grain of a lot of the people who are in their 70s and 80s who own a cleaner are selling them to somebody who's buying.
It's the roll-ups.
It's the roll-ups. So roll-ups are one issue. The children, in many cases, don't want the business. I've recently heard of some funds that are helping provide capital for people to buy businesses, and I invested a little bit of money in one because I just like the idea and the way they're doing it.
But most of the capital, the big banks, et cetera, it's gone that way, and they're investing in the big businesses.
Absolutely.
The little guys kind of left out from a capital availability. Is that a public policy question?
It's an SBA question. Now, the SBA has some programs where they'll loan up to 80%. You have to be personally liable. But then the question is, where do you get the 20%? And there's some people working on that. So there are things, but I think that that's the kind of thing we need to do more of and make it more accessible. I think we should be encouraging businesses to stay independent as long as possible. Part of what's happened is technology's enabled size in probably every industry. I remember when
enabled or demanded?
Well, I guess they go hand in hand because enabling first, but then it's a competitive advantage in many industries to be larger. But when I started in the apartment industry, it was just impossible to figure out how to handle accounting for disparate locations and things. Today, it's so easy to do things that were so hard. Mm-hmm. And that's probably true in many industries.
So where's technology kind of invaded your businesses, and how has that changed? And what do you look at from an AI perspective on how you're going to innovate your own world?
Well, technology is everywhere in most businesses, and in ours, I was involved in creating some software companies, and we did document softwares for insurance companies,
and sold those
to Oracle. Fortunately, I sold it just intentionally. In this case, I made a thoughtful decision, but as the great financial crisis of 2008 was coming, I put up for sale in 2007. But in any event, I think everything is going to be faster, cheaper, better. The information is going to help us make better decisions, whether it's underwriting a new loan. Things that now take a few months might take a few hours. It's crazy how fast things are changing. I do worry about it affecting unemployment in an adverse way. I certainly think about how it's going to affect demand for office space. It's hard to know the answer to these questions. You like to think that what you're doing is different, will not be affected, but who knows? Clearly, we will be able to assess data and information in an unprecedented speed, and ultimately with better accuracy. Today, AI has lots of mistakes, and you need an expert to overlook what the AI says. And then you need a very trained prompter to write the question in the right way. But all the middle people in between, there might be 8 or 10 people that got fired because those 2 people are handling it.
Yeah.
It is a exciting and scary time to be a 30-year-old. Fortunately, I'm not.
But you are involved in a lot of philanthropic efforts, as we've talked about. One of those is fascinating to me. And again, I think it pulls on the entrepreneurial spirit that you have. But you focus a lot on the Eastern Bloc countries, the former communist countries, and really tried to put entrepreneurship and education into those. Talk a little bit about the why and what you're doing.
Well, we believe they had more needs and more problems than we did in the U.S., and I think there are things that should be done in different parts of the world. But basically, we've endowed professors who teach entrepreneurship to take a semester and teach in that area. And we've done other things at a younger age. There's an organization that teaches entrepreneurship, and we opened in Eastern Europe a division of that, and I opened one in Dallas a long time ago. Entrepreneurship from the standpoint of childhood to adult education is I think, all important. There's no right or wrong answer, but everything to encourage that fair level playing field and to provide that hope and opportunity all is something I care about. I think we all as a country should care about.
That's great.
We talked about your ventures, real estate, wine, software, HMOs, et cetera. I used the word successes, and you kind of jumped on me a little bit ago. How do you define success for Craig Hall today?
Surviving till the next day and hopefully enjoying each one of those days. I don't know. There's financial success. You invest money and you ultimately have some more than you put in. That's I guess, a start. But it's really about making a difference in the world and about leaving things a little better than when you started. And relationships and helping other people. It's really fun to work with a lot of people. I don't know. I'll preempt a question. I'm asked all the time, why do people stay with the company so long? And I've never been able to answer it. But
leadership makes a difference.
Well, maybe. But knock on wood. I mean, I look at when you go through tough times, you don't generally get bonuses or give raises, and I feel very bad that the wine business. That's true today. It was true in the real estate business in the 80s. And, a lot of those people in the 80s are still with the company, although they're retiring a lot, right? The last 2-3 years, we've been having a lot of retirement parties. But great people.
You've given them a chance to be able to retire.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they deserve it. I mean, we've had some really great.
Did you say that's your legacy?
I don't know what to think of the word legacy. I think I'm not sure what legacy means. One of the funniest things is I don't know why my name is in the company. I admit I did it, but it's so funny too because I called it Hall Management Company in 1968. Then at some point, I changed the name to Standard Realty Company. Then I changed it back to Hall. And in anything philanthropic, I said, well, I have not used our name. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm embarrassed by it. I just don't want to. I don't want it to be braggadocio. Having your name in a business can be not braggadocio, but can be taking responsibility. So there's some benefit to that. Although at this point, I don't see it as beneficial as I once did.
You've been recognized, Horatio Alger. Gotta get it. I'm on it. Alger Award, Dallas Business Hall of Fame. Those important to you?
Yes, they are, and they were enjoyable. I smiled because I'll tell you a funny inside story, and it won't. I don't talk about this, and anyway, I don't remember the exact year, but I can kind of guess based on things. But I was notified that I was selected to be in the Texas Business Hall of Fame. And because I'm a Texan by choice, that really mattered to me. And I was very excited about it. I accepted. Then later, I withdrew, and I really made people angry. But
Why did you withdraw?
Well, I've never told anyone this. I was being investigated so much. This was sort of the RTC time and stuff. I didn't want to be an embarrassment. I was afraid, am I going to get indicted? I was scared for everything, and I did not want to be an embarrassment to them. So that's why. And that's sort of, I've never publicly stated that.
We'll assume you got the award.
No, I didn't.
No, but we'll assume it.
Hey, the fact is, it's fine. But anyway, awards are they have their place, but they're not the most important thing. The Horatio Alger Association's interesting in the I think it might have been in the mid-1980s, and I think it was Texas. So there's roughly any given time about 300 living members of this organization. Many of them, most of them, are financially successful. So roughly call it in the 1980s, a group of them got together and said, why don't we, in addition to being honored, we're supposed to be role models, why don't we put money in and give back? And today it's the largest needs-based scholarship fund in the world. And they're just raising their second endowment of $300 million right now. And the coolest thing is to see all the young people they're helping. It's basically, as I said, needs-based. And they have the first person who won this kind of scholarship level and has also now won as an honoree.
Oh, that's
and there'll be many others. It's really nice to see.
And the award too is, you mentioned the financial success, but a big part of it is overcoming some challenges. Which clearly we talked about those when you were young with the epilepsy, those sorts of things. It's showing that entrepreneurial spirit, and it's giving back to the community in some way, dedicating, committing to giving back to the community in different ways. But to make that commitment. And Craig, you surely have done that.
Well, thank you. I it's interesting. I think the organization was sort of founded with the idea that Depression era people who have succeeded. Well, we don't have the 1930s. Those people are gone. And so now when they try to, a lot of people have done great things, but they start out pretty okay to begin with. And so that part of the equation is getting more difficult.
That's
great.
You've got an hour, and you're going to meet with the 20-year-old Craig Hall that is now starting to invest in real estate, putting together some different deals and that sort of thing. How would you spend that hour, and what would you tell that Craig Hall?
I would assess things if you face, which I know I would in that case, a long, challenging downturn. When you come out of it, I think I fault myself for being a little too emotional and not big picture enough thoughtful. I think I could have rebuilt the company in a interesting, much larger way. And I don't know if that would have been better, if I would have been happier. I never will. But I guess I would also say, don't panic. Don't take yourself too seriously. Just enjoy each day.
Terrific. We talk about depth, and I think over the course of the last several minutes, we've gotten a sense of your depth. And I think of that as thoughtfulness, insightfulness, and a really commitment to the people around you and what you're doing. But you also see that breadth. You don't find very many people that have been, and I'll use my word, successful in not only the real estate, which, as I said at the outset, you're kind of known for, but so many other different areas where you've used that intellect, that insightfulness, that analytical ability to really find businesses and create businesses that have made a difference. Craig, thanks for being with us. We sure appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Again, today's episode is sponsored by Clay Cooley Automotive, a family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years.